Glenn and I have been working on virtual employment models for a long time, a long, long time. This isn't new. This has been going on for years,
Here.
and how to hire people becomes really core to the whole thing. And I've got an approach to it. Glenn's got a different approach, and both of the approaches work for us, and that's the point. And we want to talk about these scalable virtual models. They're global, they're great. You can get around a lot of the old day kind of stuff of W-2s and people in rooms in what I would think of as prisons created by corporations where, no, you got to come in the office so I can keep an eye on you.
I
Yeah,
don't know
there's
if
a
you
lot of
saw
that.
Amazon just announced they're demanding all of their workforce come back to the office
This is
five
great
days a
for
week.
me because I think my entrepreneur experience campus and red pill pathway business is going to explode the more that stuff goes on, because some of those really, really talented people are going to say, is there another way to live?
Yes, there is.
Yes, there is. All right. Why don't you talk about it? Because your story is incredible about how you got out of a pretty successful career.
Yeah, it was without going too far into it. I was a lawyer by training. I worked in investment banking for a while, did a few things, and the 2008 financial crisis was just a big wake up call. I saw what was going on around me. I saw what was happening. My current job in finance was kind of drying up, and I had been talking about doing something different with my wife for years, and it just you know, so we just took the plunge. We got rid of our place in New York. We got rid of most of our stuff, and we moved out to Canary Islands, which is where she was from. And I would say my biggest regret is that I didn't do it 5 years sooner.
Yeah.
You spend so much time talking about it. And I go back and look at that, and I said, the amount of days I felt like the hamster on the wheel is ridiculous, but it takes a big reframing, but a very worthwhile reframing.
I think the word reframing is an important part about virtual employment models. And I think that what I notice now is there's trends and belief systems that form, and then other people notice. And then 5 years later, people are copying what people had innovated in 10 years earlier. And for example, the idea of being a virtual nomad and then having a passive income to support that lifestyle, and how one does that is not copying people who did that, who are now teaching how to do it. I did not create a lifestyle company from reading Tim Ferriss's book. I did it before Tim Ferriss wrote that book, using principles and not even trying to create that because I was focused on what I wanted and not even thinking about how to get it. I just did what I wanted. In our society, we're taught not to do that. We're taught, don't do what you want. That's too dangerous. That's a belief
And there
system that's not true.
and there are more and more. There's a lot of talented people out there that aren't looking to do the same thing. I've hired some great people that have lived, frankly, all over the world, and even some that were digital nomads. I had a great sales guy working with me for years, who over the course of 3 years working together, he traveled throughout South America, he traveled throughout Central America, he went over to Europe, went over to Asia, and he would go someplace for a few months, rent a place, work like a normal work day. It was a great worker, put the time in, put the effort in, but he was a digital nomad, and he wasn't thinking passive income. He was thinking, I'm young, I'm energetic, I have no problem putting in a good day's work. I just want to do it where I want to do it. So when I get off, I can be someplace new.
I think that's the key to it, is the virtual employment model you create should be the one you create, and understanding the potential, understanding the options, understanding what fits you, what's possible, what doesn't work is what's key. In other words, knowing the principles of it as opposed to having somebody's 5 steps to create a virtual nomadic lifestyle like me, because then you're copying them. So you may as well just keep working for
Yeah.
Amazon.
Yeah. And frankly, what's good for one person isn't another. I mean, the whole point of this is for us all to find what works for us. And having virtual employees, it's giving them the power to do what works for them. I have, like I said, people that have traveled around. I have someone in Sardinia, someone in Barcelona, someone in Germany, but also someone who lives in the suburbs outside of Phoenix, and he's very happy, and that's where he lives, and he doesn't want to go anyplace else. And but he wants to work from home, and he wants to see his kid grow up, and he wants to be able to go to an after school event if it's happening, and he wants a level of freedom, but also is a hard worker, and is not. It's not like he's looking to be lazy. He's just looking for a level of freedom that a normal punch the clock office isn't going to give him.
Yeah. And I think you led into what I wanted to talk about around how to hire people. And I figured it out. It took a lifetime though. And there's only one interview question that matters, and it's what do you want? And when I figured out the only interview question that matters is what do you want, and everything else branches off of there, it got really easy. And I can give you an example. And with Rowan, who's helping me build the Entrepreneur Experience Virtual Campus and Red Pill Pathway, which is where I'm focused right now. Glen's focused on the sales outsourcing, lead generation business, OpGen, was a question of what do you want? And she said $15 an hour. And I want to work on, and I said, no, I mean it. And she was confused because no one's ever asked her. Ever.
Yeah.
And I said, what do you want? She says, well, I want to do that. And I said, no, I mean, what do you want? I'm looking for the story. And she said, I got 3 kids. One of them has Down syndrome, and I want to be able to take care of my kids. I said, done.
Yeah.
Now I've got to figure out, can this work? So now I understand what she wants. And I'm thinking, okay, I already knew what she is able to do. Then I have to figure out what can she do and what does she want to do. Now I won't go through the whole story, but where we got was someone who actually is a brilliant UX, UI, graphic, conceptual thinker who could design an entire infrastructure visually in brand new technologies without having any idea how to do it. Never having done it before, did it with me in a chaotic environment. Why does that happen? Because her family comes first, and I have to honor that. That's the thing. That's the thing. How to hire people. Make a commitment, and there's going to be a moment where they're going to not believe you, and you have to say, no, go ahead, take the week off. I'll do your work for you because your 2 kids are in the hospital.
Well, and that also goes to letting people's talents shine. You know, one of the things that I don't believe in micromanaging people. If I have to micromanage someone, I don't want to work with them, and I don't want to be their boss. I want to inspire them. I want to coach them. I want to elevate them. I want to give them the room to be the best they could be while we work together and strive for continuous improvement, which also goes to, you know, one of the number one rules in hiring a virtual workforce is knowing when to, for lack of a better word, fire or let go of a virtual workforce.
Yeah.
And probably the biggest mistake people leave is going back to that sort of office mentality where I will just stand over their desk and make sure they're doing things. And that's not someone you want to work with. You know, cut that cord as fast as possible and find someone who really wants to be there and wants to embrace the freedom you've given them to live their best life so they could then do the best at their job.
I think it's so important. And, you know, it's a work in progress. I feel like I got there with it, but it's still a work in progress. And I look back at all these different experiences going back to I started doing this probably when I was in my 20s, this approach, but it was in a physical space, and then it sort of moved virtually. And I'm looking back, I'm thinking the success stories and the ones that didn't work. And I think the success stories were finding the right people. And the ones that didn't work were finding the wrong people and projecting myself onto them and thinking they were like me and making assumptions and not recognizing that not everybody is going to have the ability to know who they are to be honest with themselves, to be able to handle it. In other words, they need somebody to tell them what to do because they can't tell themselves what to do even, or there could be a values or an ethical kind of thing where they're just going to take advantage. So I've seen that happen a lot.
As have I. As have I. I want to go back to what you said, asking people what they want, which is great because I would say one of the biggest things I'd recommend when hiring a virtual workforce, and probably in another one of these, we should talk about how to manage a virtual workforce because you and I have loads of experience with that. Really, yeah. But I've given up thinking, watching out for the bad. Some people are bad interviewers, and if you can't, be good at an interview, that's already a red flag. But most people can hold it together long enough if they prepared to look you in the face and sound good for 30 minutes.
Yes.
So the normal everyday boiler interview isn't going to tell you that much. I've definitely hired more than my share of people that I thought, wow, they aced that interview, only to find out a month into their, working with them that, oh, I made such a mistake. So get to know them. Ask them questions like, what do you want out of this? Ask them things like, what's the most important thing in your life right now? Get to know the type of person they are, because the type of person they are will go further than them telling you their biggest weaknesses and their biggest challenges in the work environment.
I love this thinking, and I'm going to talk about it from my own experience on the other side of it. I'm really good at networking my way into places and rooms I should not be in, and getting clients I probably shouldn't have gotten, and getting jobs I shouldn't have gotten. And I'm lying to myself because I want something, and I'm not lying to them. I'm lying to myself. And I'll give you an example is I became a VP of private client insurance at Gallagher, one of the largest insurance brokers in the world. And I don't have a network of ultra high net worth individuals. Anybody in that industry knows, without a network already in place, because you grew up in the right place or you've built it or whatever, you're not going to sell anything. And I talked my way into that job, and I worked for the area president of Gallagher. Down the hall was RM Gallagher, one of the kids who was going to end up running the company. I'm in a room on a floor at the top of this huge corporation, public corporation, and there wasn't a chance in hell I was going to succeed. And it was a bad hire for them. I lasted 6 months, and that was like obvious. But I got all kinds of stuff out of them. I got a trip to Chubb school, insurance training school. I got a trip to San Francisco. It was great for me. And I got a check every month for 6 months while I figured myself out.
And I know you well enough to know that you probably knocked their socks off on that interview. They were like, wow, this guy's a superstar.
Blew it away. And then they're wondering, wait a minute, what the hell did we just do? Because, eventually the truth comes out. And the truth was, I didn't want to be there. I wanted a stable paycheck while I was figuring myself out. But I lied to myself. And I thought, see, this is the thing, is people lie to themselves. They really mean what they say. And we interview great salespeople. They're going to sell. They'll just 100%. turn it on and they'll sell.
Even if they're a bad salesperson, they know enough to sell themselves.
Right. They're good at getting sales jobs.
Yes.
They're not good at keeping them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of that.
And ask them, questions that really, I don't want to say get personal, but get a little personal. I love you. What is it you want? And I like asking people, tell me just what you liked about your last couple of jobs. What about it? Like, no, tell me what you did. Tell me what you liked about it. And really trying to understand who they are. And if you understand who they are, you'll get a much better understanding of how they'll work. And it took me years to figure that out. And I definitely hired a lot of the wrong people because they knocked my socks off in an interview. Yep. And I thought they are going to be great. And then the second mistake I made, and I'll go back to this, is when the alarm bells were flashing and the house was on fire, I thought I could fix them.
Yes.
You can't.
Never. You can't fix something that doesn't make sense. That's the biggest mistake. And, look, going back to the Matrix. So people who work in the Matrix, they work at Amazon, they work in an insurance company, they work in somebody else's infrastructure. They work in somebody else's infrastructure. They work in somebody else's company. The people in those companies aren't in charge of anything. Even the people running those companies aren't in charge of their companies. The investors are in charge of those companies. The stock analysts are in charge of those companies. So those companies are forced to do stupid things. And if you're in somebody's infrastructure like this thing Glenn and I are talking about isn't going to work. So people they want them to go back to the office because they can't do what we're talking about. So I love this model because if you do have your own control over what you do, because you're in charge of the money and no one can tell you what to do, you're going to crush it as David versus the Goliath in your market if you do this right, because you're going to get the best people around you because they don't want to be in those places. They want out.
Yeah. And I've found, some of the virtual workers that I've hired, some of the people that live in all different parts of the world, even country, have been some of the smartest people I've had the privilege to work with, but they just didn't either fit in or want to be part of that corporate hierarchical structure. It bled them dry, and it's not what they wanted to be, and it's not what they wanted to do. They wanted to have a level of freedom that a punch the clock office, even if it's executive, you're still punching the clock, just doesn't give you.
Well, I found, we originally connected around a company called remote.co, which is owned by FlexJob. So I put out an ad on RemoteCo. I'm looking for somebody to make cold calls. And Glenn shows up and I'm like, okay, he's not going to be doing that forever. But what do you want? And it's like, well, I want to have lunch with my kid. I want to do this. It's a lifestyle thing. Yeah. Maybe a surf shop. I want to go surfing in the morning. I want to make money. I couldn't have afforded someone with your level of experience. There's no way. It would have been impossible. It never would have happened.
I just exited my own company and was looking for the next thing to do and was looking for something to keep me busy while I figured it out. And I had been doing sales my whole life. And I stumbled across your ad layer. I was like, hey, why not? Let's see what that does. I said, I'll probably do it for 2 or 3 months and that'll be that. But we hit it off. And frankly, to your credit, you gave me the flexibility to come in and say, this is not how I would do this. This is how I want to do this. And let me start to do my things in my direction. And it worked out great for both of us.
Let me talk about that because that's the perfect segue to this, because what happened was that I was really needing someone to get on the phone to service some clients that we had and prepare myself as we got more clients. And Glenn is not going to work in an outbound sales process for very long. He's just not going to do it. And after a couple of months, that was kind of obvious, but he had a big idea, which is, what if we go to the UK and find companies there that want to expand into the United States? And I was like, go. Well, the next thing you know, we got a bunch of signed clients and we're running that playbook. And I'm getting frustrated because I'm like, why aren't there more clients coming? And it's because he's not going to run that playbook, which means it's being in a process. It's making the calls. He's not going to do that. And I could see that was happening. And then I've got to think, all right, what is this nature of this relationship? What could it be? Or does it not going to work? Because maybe that's all I need and I can't go further. So we allowed it to expand. And now Glenn's been running the company without me for 4.5 years. And if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have been able to do the entrepreneur experience and red pill pathway stuff and leave the company. I would have screwed myself with narrow short-term thinking and say, oh, this guy won't do what I want. I either make him do what I want or find somebody else, instead of thinking, no, I started a partnership here. It doesn't work for me. We work together. That's the key. It's the mentality. I never thought of anybody working for me. I always thought we're working together. That's the difference in this whole thing. Amazon can't think that way. They can't. It's impossible. It's hierarchical. It's a hierarchy.
And you gave me the freedom to take my own experience and expand things out. You gave me the freedom to say, this is the direction I would take our focus. Let's look at the UK. You gave me the freedom to say, hey, look, I see a big I see a big lag in what we're doing. We were creating all these great opportunities for these companies, but we were really at that point doing more of a lead generation type job. And the problem is we're handing off these great opportunities, but the companies didn't know what to do with them, didn't know how to follow the process, didn't know how to execute. So we were like, well, rather than be a top of the funnel company, let's be a full funnel company. Let's show them not just how to fill the funnel, but how to run a complex sales process, how to sell into a large enterprise organization, whether it's a Fortune 50 or mid-market. Let's give them the full suite of services that a proper salesperson would give them. And it resonated, and it's been where, why we are today.
One of the
And
things I would say to an entrepreneur who's listening to this, or a coach, or even a service provider kind of person, they're different. So an entrepreneur, you're kind of living in what's next. You're always ahead. You're looking ahead and you're saying what's coming as opposed to what exists. You can see it really clearly. Consultant, service provider, you're great at something. You want to deliver that service. Coach, you've really won a hard fought battle with yourself and you want to support, uplift, and help other people. They're very different kind of energies, but they're all intermixed and combined. So those are just generalities, but that's kind of how I organize it in my own mind. And for each one of those kinds of people, there's a blueprint, meaning what fits you. So what I see often with what you're talking about are these, we did EOS for a long time, Gino Wickman's approach, and it didn't work at all. So we're following Entrepreneur Operating System. We're following Traction. We did it as a team. We followed the playbook. We filled out all the VTO, Vision Traction Organizer, and we met in Chicago. You flew in, Dave flew in from Florida. And I'm like, and I was in a CEO group. We even went to a company that did Traction and succeeded with it. And I'm like, why isn't this working? And then I realized it did work. It did work, but not the approach. The how-to approach didn't work at all. The concept of what do you love to do? What do I love to do? What does Dave love to do? What do other people love to do? How does this come together? And then how do I drop the rope when I'm ready and say, I'm out? Worked. But that's not what they were teaching when that was brought down to the level of coaching. It wasn't figure out your own way through this. And how to hire people, virtual employment model, I think requires self-awareness at some point. And people have got to figure out, why am I here in this life? What do I really want to do?
Yeah. And going back to the hiring, I think asking them what they want is probably the most important thing, going back to that first. But I'd say the other thing is be really, really clear about what you want from them and what it's going to be like. And I honestly consider my first interview with someone to have two primary goals. One is to learn about them, and two, to convince them not to work with me almost.
That's right. I do that too. Yeah. I'm like, this is going to be tough. I'm crazy. So what that means is I got ideas and they're going to roll into the system. We have a system now. I figured it out. It's called Agile Development. So it works. And we pulled it from the software industry. So I can do that with Rowan now. Whereas before I'm just throwing ideas into the system and it's chaos. Now I know how Agile development works. And it means there's never an answer. You're always doing new things constantly. And you have sprints and stand-up meetings. Like finally figured out how to integrate that. But that whole process is not for everybody. And I'm thinking of a couple of people. One guy who he wanted requirements documents from me all the time when we were trying to do something new. And I'm like, I can't do that. I can't think that way. I see an idea. I want to tell you, I want to form the idea into something. I need you to do this piece of it, push back and tell me not to if it won't work. That's what I need. He couldn't do that. He was so used to being in a hierarchy because he'd been in one for 30 years. Yeah. He could not change his thinking. So he wasn't a good fit. Stayed with him for 2 years. And I was very frustrated with him.
Yeah. And the sooner you figure that out, the better. And to the extent you could figure it out in the interview, even better. And I do that. This is what the job is. This is what I'm like. This is what I need from you. This is what you're doing. Like, tell me right now if this doesn't work for you. And listen for the hesitation. Listen for because some people just want to get a job. and they think they're telling you one. And I even throw some things out there that I want to push back. I want them to be like, really, you're going to do that? I want to know that the person I'm looking to hire is going to be able to work with me and be able to push back and can think for themselves. And so all those are key, getting to know them and pushing those questions, because frankly, that's more important to me than let me hear you do a cold call.
Yes, because it doesn't matter how good you are. It's not the point. The point is, can you be good? But what really matters is, do you really want to do this? And do you even know if you really want to do this? Because do you even know what it is? And I've had people that I've hired who've never done the things they ended up doing. So they couldn't possibly know whether it was for them or not. And those have been some of the best people, because it was so obvious they had the talent to do it. And then one of the things that worked for me was to give them little projects to start. Like one woman who set up, Stacy, who set up the entire infrastructure for the data department, which is really very difficult to do. Her first job was $10 an hour putting data in a spreadsheet. And she kept telling me, you're doing this wrong. Why do you want to do it like this? And I'm like, oh, I got somebody good here. She was an eating disorders therapist. She works for Accenture right now. She runs a sales operations group because I couldn't afford to keep her after 3 years. She's just like, I want more money. I want more money. I'm like, you need to go work for a corporation at this point. Like, I'm not going to pay you 10 grand a month to do this job. It's never going past 5 a month. And she pushed me to 5. I'm like, this is a perfect person. Let her work her way up and out. I got a department, which is still probably being used. Some of the stuff, ideas she had, I bet you're still using some of the stuff she figured. I could have never figured that stuff out myself.
Yeah. Which just goes to show it's more the person than anything else. And know that, and so many, it doesn't matter, male, female, race, age. I've had some stellar people who were, semi-retired and basically came back to some things and knocked my socks off. And I've had young people that don't have that much experience, and just the same, they were sponges. And all I had to do was say something once, and they took it in and they put it into practice, and they excelled. And what's the next thing I can learn? What's the next thing I can learn? And it's look for the person. The person's the key, not their history, the person's the key.
And the relationship too. So we had one very good business developer named Craig, who I had a really hard time working with. And he was very good. And the only way to work with this person was to do it his way. And that took me, that was hard. But it worked for the moment and the situation. And then it was hard to expand a lot beyond that because he had a boundary. So that boundary has to be respected and understood. I think the whole point of this, we got a couple of minutes left, but I would summarize this and I would say it is, there is no formula to this. This is called being a human being. And the formula is notice, adjust, and calibrate. It's notice what's going on, adjust as you see things shift, and calibrate what you're doing with the other person and the market and the company as it changes. And the pathway into it, I think, is to know the options, to understand what's worked and what's coming next into the world.
I'll just expand on that. If you've got a virtual company and you're hiring, you're not looking to be the next Accenture. You're not looking to hire. You're not going to be hiring 1,000 people. You're going to have a core team. So those hires are integral. So get to know them. Take the time in the interview process. And if they're not going to work, and if they're not a good fit, cut it quick, because it's going to cost you far more than you think it's going to save you.
Cut it quick. And was often my error. And I think yours too, with some cases where I felt like I'm exhausted by this hiring process. Like I found somebody, I got a body here. I just don't want to have to deal with this anymore. Yeah. So I would talk myself into more time.
Which ends up taking more energy than finding a new person.
I think that's an important comment. I'm going to stay on for 10 more minutes for everyone, but I want to just end with that too, is what I found was one person on the team, when you get these virtual kind of companies, that's not the right fit will drain everybody's energy.
Yes.
Thanks, Glenn.
Thanks, Larry. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
I want to talk about something in relation to this virtual company idea, and that is there's a lot of people who are packaging these concepts into courses and programs, and they're teaching it as a coach or a consultant, but mostly as a coach. And they're looking to scale that knowledge. So what they want to do is create a group program or a digital course to help people learn how to do what Glenn and I did. And we're continuing to do every day. And I started learning how to do this when I was probably 21 years old, and Glenn's been doing it a long time too. And none of this is really new. It's just now it's easier because we have a big global virtual environment and technology that allows us to do it more easily. And it's mainstreamed to the point where it's less weird. So when I started doing it, it was weird. And I created a virtual company before people were talking about that. So it was hard to explain sometimes to people, even clients. And I would say, they'd say, well, where's your office? And I'd be like, we don't have one. I'd be like, what do you mean? That means to them, it's not credible. It's not real. It's not solid. So I learned how to get around that. It wasn't a problem, but eventually it wasn't an issue. And then people started doing it. And then when Zoom came out, it made it easier, but no one else would turn their camera on. They still thought it was an audio conference until the pandemic. And then I'm like, oh, this is great. Everyone else has turned their camera on. We were using Slack early, and people were using email. So the clients didn't want to use Slack, and the clients didn't want to use Zoom. So when you're innovating and you're early, it can be challenging. And I'm going through that right now with the video metaverse campus, where some people come in and they're immediately like, well, can't we do this on Zoom? And I'm like, no, we can't, because this is what's next. And you could use Zoom, go ahead, but I'm not going to. I'm not going to do that. And people are like, whoa, what? I don't understand. What? It doesn't. Just, it's okay. Take a deep breath. We'll get there, because these new things take a while, and then they mainstream, and then everyone's comfortable with them. You can get comfortable with it, but you got to go through a little bit of uncomfortability first. So you're going to see this with what you're doing in these programs, because what's happening is they're teaching you what used to work. And what I mean by that is the minute anything gets big and it's being packaged by a marketer, sold as a programmatic system in a group or a course, it doesn't work anymore, because what they're doing is they're showing you what used to work, because they're getting down to a saleable package. This is the problem with this stuff. So what I noticed with this is that none of it works ever, because it didn't work for them. What they're doing is they're making it easier to sell. And this is what marketing is. Marketing is a way to package something to make it easier to sell. So it works for the person selling the thing. Now, does it work? It works when the individual who buys is not in pain. You're in pain, but you're not mired in it thinking that other person's system is going to get you out of pain. It's the opposite. Their system, if it's good, will lead to more pain. In other words, recognizing it's on me to figure out what I want out of this, and it's on me to struggle through it, and it's on me to find my way forward, understanding the principles underneath what they're saying. And sometimes in these programs, group programs and courses, it's hard to do that because the person who created it doesn't know. This is what happened to me with Traction and Gino Wickman's stuff in EOS, which is great. But it was packaged, and there was a whole coaching ecosystem that sprung up around it, where some of the coaches were great because they understood how to adapt it. They understood how to sit in a room with a group of executives or people with a virtual company or whatever, Glenn, Dave, and I at the time, and say, what do you guys want? Why are you doing this? What are your strengths and weaknesses? Others couldn't do that because they were in the cookie cutter model of what was sold to them by Gino Wickman's company, because he packaged it because that's what works to sell something like this. I saw the same thing with Donald Miller's stuff, with StoryBrand, with the web companies he innovated in. As the website designers became commoditized, Donald Miller shows up and he gave them a whole program. HubSpot, same thing with content marketing stuff. And those are packaged programs. And the people who succeed are the ones who don't, they take the shrink wrap off the package. So instead of buying it to get out of my pain, they're buying it because they want a tool. If you follow the leader, you're going to fail with these tools because it's not how they succeeded in the first place. And it's not how any of this stuff ever works. It never works. These are the principles underneath this. So the success that Glenn and I are talking about comes from paying attention, which requires some struggle. Getting out of pain doesn't mean feeling better. It means saying, I'm on it. I got this. I can do this. I'm not trying to get out of pain. The marketers are trying to get you out of pain. So you buy their stuff. They gave you an answer as the guru, and now you're following them up some hill somewhere. Now we got this right now with Jeff Walker with the product launch formula. And I'm doing Jeff Walker's program without doing his program because the only thing in Jeff Walker's program that matters is the concept of Hollywood movie rollouts. It's like, don't go out and sell the movie. It's bring the celebrities out on all the talk shows, roll it. That's an orchestrated, organized, coherent, get in the market, David and Goliath strategy. That's what he saw years ago. And then he turned it into the product launch formula and sideways sales letter and all this stuff. None of that works anymore because it's too late. It's done. We're in a different environment. But the principle of letting people get to know you, talking about what you care about in a market based on knowing the market and understanding it, it works. Of course it works. So what Jeff Walker's selling right now is an AI version of something that stopped working years ago, but is based on a principle that will always work. That's Jeff Walker's genius. That's why he was so successful, is he looked up and he said, why do I don't want to sell anymore. I don't want to push. I don't know him, but I just saw some of his stuff. And now it's packaged. It's shrink wrapped. And when it gets down to AI now in particular, that's the ultimate beginner. So they're selling this to the ultimate beginner. They're selling this to somebody who just doesn't want to do it. They just want somebody to tell me what to do. I'm exhausted by my business, or I'm excited because I've never seen anything like this before. It's new to me. So you have both poles. You have fear and exhaustion, or excitement and hope of someone who does not understand that this program has been around for a long time and is not seeing the reason it succeeds. It doesn't succeed because of the product packaged by the marketer, in this case, Jeff Walker, product launch formula. I'm picking on him because he relaunched, and I'm like, oh my God, all these people are going to buy this thing and then think it worked, is going to work. It's not going to work. And then they're going to blame themselves. And then maybe they'll buy more from him or somebody else. I'm like, because I did that. That's what happened to me in 2020. I started buying all this stuff and I'm like doing it. And I'm like, why does none of this work? None of it ever worked for me. What always worked was figuring out the principles underneath these things. This is what Glenn and I are talking about. I will never create a packaged course around how to hire people, my experience with the virtual employment model, ever. I will never do that. I'll do workshops on it and we'll be asking questions. That's what's coming next for me, partnerships and workshops in our campus. Where everybody makes money, including the people who come, because you'll have a voice, you'll have a seat at the table. It's not me on a stage, Jeff Walker, Tony Robbins, Russell Brunson, Alex Hormozy telling you the answer, because they don't have the answer for me. They don't have the answer for you either. And they know it. They know it. It's just they don't know how to do it differently because that's what they grew up with. It's worked for them. Sitting around a table, I have a virtual table in the video campus. We're sitting around a table as equals. I don't know what's right for you. You don't know what's right for me. That's why we have a conversation. But when you have people in the room who've been there and done that 100 times, They shortcut the time to failure and success. So you're now wasting all this time, money, and effort going